Meeting to order at 6:31. Any adjustments to the agenda this evening?
Yes, I have two. The first, and they're both under new business. If you would add letter F, it's the heating fuel bid. I'm going to present that to the board. And then letter G, consideration of John Matola as a volunteer boys and girls middle school soccer. And that is the adjustments.
You said middle school soccer?
Yes, boys and girls. He's available.
Motion to accept the board meeting agenda as adjusted?
So moved.
Anybody want any input? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Any recognitions this evening?
No.
Consideration of the regular board meeting minutes, August 11th, 2022.
Making a motion to accept the agenda. The minutes, I'm sorry. Second.
Any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. No consent agenda this evening. Presentation, Paul Biddle, CS Board Emergency Management Agency.
Yes, while Paul's getting ready, I just want to let you know that Paul, as well as the administrators, we've been working on safety plans and programs, and Paul's now here to explain some of the things that we've been doing. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Biddle.
Thank you very much indeed. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Paul Biddle. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for the town of Searsport. I've been in post approximately 6 weeks, took over from Bud Rivers. I'm a certified emergency manager from the state of Maine. I spent 20 years in UK law enforcement and the last 16 years been advising countries around the world on emergency management, including, but not exclusively, in active shooter, counterinsurgency and counterterrorism. I guess I've got to start really at Uvalde. After Uvalde, the chief and myself, police chief, went to see the superintendent, and we sat down and we both agreed, or we all agreed, that we needed to put some matters in place, especially as the reporting was coming through of the issues that were coming out of the Uvalde school shooting. Some of the issues to do with not only with the school, but with the police response and generally the way that the whole thing was handled. I think at this point I'd like to state that we were made exceptionally welcome and indeed we became, over the last 6 weeks, an effective team along with the superintendent's administration. Since then we have met weekly. We've undertaken 2 workshops with the RSU 20 school leadership, which has included the current interim findings from Uvalde, and we've also come up with various strategies to move the security and safety of the school forward. I myself have undertaken a security assessment of the school, which we gave to the superintendent. And on top of that, tomorrow we will be holding a Waldo County full desktop exercise along with all the law enforcement from Waldo County, EMS, EMA, County EMA, Sheriff's Office, ambulance from various, from Stockton, from Searsport and from Belfast. So it's going to be an all singing, all dancing. And indeed, as I came over, the radio came over, the Waldo County Dispatch, reminding everyone to attend tomorrow. On top of that, we are also undertaking teacher training on the 30th. It's an all-day teacher training. And that will culminate in our findings and how we feel that the school should be moving forward. And I can go into more detail should you require it. Thank you.
Questions? That's why I was looking at you.
With regards to the strategies that you're looking at putting in place for the school, overall, are there strategies that are being recommended or suggested for individual classrooms to slow down should someone breach the front doors?
I think the first thing I would say to you that we are trying as best we can to stay within the strategies that are already placed nationally. One of the things that we have agreed with the school in consultation, I'll say, with the chief and everyone else, is currently there are 3 types of lockdowns within the school. We now are going to have one. There will be one lockdown. That means that, and again, this came out of the Uvalde shooting, where there was a lot of confusion about the type of lockdown that were going to happen. Teachers were confused. There was miscommunication, whether it was a lock-in, lock-out, lockdown. We are simply going to have a lockdown. The other thing is that part and parcel of the teacher training will be that they will identify themselves the risks within that classroom. They will identify what needs to be done to secure that classroom. Clearly, the onus will be on the individual teacher to protect their students. If at the end of the day, and part of the teaching will be that if that teacher feels unsafe themselves, they are unlikely then to have the children safe. So the onus will be on the individual teacher, whether they leave through the window or they leave somehow away from danger. And part of the training will be for them to identify whether they're jumping from the one danger area to another danger area. Barricading clearly is an issue. We have, alongside the superintendent, we've agreed that all the classrooms will be locked at the start of the day, and that includes all external doors as well. And the school resource officer and the custodians will go around and they will be checking that. So there will be no doors left open, and part and parcel of our training program on the 30th is that we will physically be testing those classrooms. The teachers will go inside. We will help them identify the best way of securing that classroom, and then we will lock them in, and we will actually check those locks to make sure that they are working. One of the things I would say about this, that this doesn't stop and end now. This is a process. I have made it very, very clear to the chief and the superintendent that just because we're doing this doesn't mean we then move on to the next project. This is the one and only singular, most important potential emergency that we have in the town of Searsport. I state that categorically right now. That is how I feel. Now, clearly, an explosion in GAC, Irvine Terminal, something catastrophic happening elsewhere, but the likelihood of it affecting our children in the manner of which an active shooter is likely to do so, or intruder or whatever. So that's the importance that I'm certainly putting on it, and certainly the chief is as well, and the town, I hasten to add. So whilst we are doing tomorrow and then the 30th, it doesn't stop there, and we will continue working with the superintendent to then develop the skills. And if there is a shortcoming and the teachers require more training, or the superintendent has identified another risk, we will continue working ad infinitum as long as I'm in tenure. That's the promise I will make you. And we will work on every single aspect. And indeed, if the board, yourselves, have a concern about a particular area, through the superintendent, we will work to make sure that that's put in place.
I got all kinds of questions. I'm assuming that the teachers have already had Alice training, and it was a while ago, and then, no, they haven't had Alice training. So are they gonna have Alice training as part of this, and at what point do we incorporate the students into that?
The answer is yes. At the moment, we haven't got anyone to go through that training. This is part of Alice training by default.
Right.
And I have trained both Alice and Alert, so I can deliver that when it's necessary. The fundamental issue for us is to make sure that the school is safe on the 31st. We will then develop those skills from there onwards. What I would say about Alice and Alert training and the other types of training is that they are generic to every school. What I want to do is have something that is bespoke to this school.
And I'm assuming your recommendations have also included infrastructure weaknesses such as doors that go in and versus out and things of that nature.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I asked this question at the last meeting, and of course, I haven't been involved in any of the preparation, but it seems like the focus is the exterior perimeter break of an active shooter. What is being done with administration and staff to recognize internal? They've already made their way through the door, they get off the bus, they've got it in their locker. Is that a totally different plan when something like that happens? Or, you know, what kind of training is there being done for staff to recognize?
The training that we're going to deliver will be on a number of levels. It will be, and indeed the exercise tomorrow for the first responders. I say first responders first, armed response. Teachers are in fact the first responders. It will be a multitude of scenarios. And one of the problems with active shooter is that there is so many scenarios. And if I delivered 100, you'd find one that I haven't done. So we have to look at what's happened previously, what we know is likely to happen. So for me, it's somebody seeing a gunman outside, and what do you do? Then if they breach, what do you do? Then there's a question of a teacher finding a weapon within the school, what do you do? So we're looking at things that have happened, that are likely to happen, and things that have happened previously in other schools. There is always going to be that scenario which you could never plan for. Beslan, I don't know if you know the Russian school or the Chechen school that was attacked by terrorists. They had 30 highly armed terrorists, all with body-borne IEDs strapped to themselves, went into a school and took it hostage. Planning for that would be almost impossible. I've dealt with stuff like that in the past, and for me to go down that road would effectively take away the teachers being able to teach. It would be a prison scenario, and we would have 15, 20 armed guards outside, and that's not realistic. So I have to work with what is likely to happen, what has happened in the past, and we know that from Columbine and Uvalde and various other places, and of course what's happened in Stockton and what's happened here. So there are realistic aspects to it. That is not to say, with my background, that I would not be prepared for something to happen and I can deal with that. And that's what I'm working with the local PD, and that's what I'm going to try and do over the ensuing weeks and months to get them to understand that there are other likelihoods or potential likelihoods to happen. But we have to be realistic that we have a very good school, very, very good teachers, and we have to let them do their job as best they can without having to worry too much about things that may not happen. So we have to, temper it down slightly. My job is to worry about all the other stuff. And then working with the superintendent and the senior management, if there are other concerns, and indeed if you have any particular concerns or scenarios, please bring them to me and I'll certainly look at them.
So you've, whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
So we are going to be scenarios as the training goes for a student bringing in thing here as well. I think that's what he was really referring to, wasn't it, Tony? And whether we would have the ability to lock down sections, or I think that's what we was kind of looking for in the future, I would.
My recommendation is that regardless what happens, because we don't know what's going to happen next,
Right?
and working on the premise that if somebody were to bring in a gun, there's a likelihood that somebody else might have brought in the gun. We might have caught one person, but there might be another one there.
Right.
We will have one lockdown, and everyone will go into lockdown.
Right.
So my recommendation is, hypothetically, a teacher finds somebody with a knife. We will lock down. It might be for 15 minutes. It might be for 10 minutes until we are absolutely sure that there isn't something else going to happen. But at that moment in time, we have to assume that the children are at risk, therefore lock down. If you start bringing in part lockdowns or lock down part of the school, or making things complicated, there is always going to be one teacher or one person there that doesn't know quite what to do. Keep it simple. Now, as far as the children are concerned, even more so. If there is one lockdown, they know what to do. And the teachers will then deal with that, and we will go through a training program, and it will be continuation training on how they can deal with students, and culminating, I hope, by the end of the year, that there will be a full exercise, including all the people, law enforcement, etc., the students, and the teachers as well. So we can actually go through everything that we've learned and gone through those scenarios. And so that the students will know, the rationale for doing these things. I think for me, the students are already very much aware of fire drills. So we need to sort of bring this into very much mainstream thinking. So as much as they will do a fire drill, they will also do a lockdown drill. And it won't be a part lockdown, it won't be just that part or whatever. So, for example, if there's something happens in the middle school, all the schools will be in lockdown. My recommendation will always be, let's not take a chance that this is not something bigger than we don't know. It gives us a chance to take a breath, look at the situation, and then move on.
I understood the one lockdown for everybody, but I think that we've talked so much about somebody coming in to harm people that we was inquiring to make sure that that we were going to practice from within as well. Oh, yeah, that's what.
The scenario tomorrow is both.
That's what
So,
we was hoping for.
Yeah, no, the scenario tomorrow is that a teacher sees somebody outside with a long arm. They phone 911. And again, that's opened up a number of issues for us because we don't know if dispatch, what their protocols are as far as letting, for example, the superintendent know. So that's going to bring up some issues with that. And of course, then there's a question of where do we go from there? The next part of the scenario is that they've actually broken into the school. And so we will look at how we're going to respond with that. We're also going to look at, and we have to look at some things like mass casualty. So that will be talked about tomorrow, and that's why we have EMS there. Interesting to note that mass casualty in Waldo County is 5. Okay, because that's the the figure that the ambulance service can't deal with by themselves. So we're going to go through that. And we're also going to look at some of the other tactics that are being done by small towns. One of the things the presentation tomorrow will very much be about, we're a small town with limited resources. And what the conversations that the chief and I have had with the superintendent is, Searsport PD will respond. The school resource officer will respond. We don't know how long it's going to be for anyone else to turn up. Uvalde, everyone was dead before most of the PD turned up. Sandy Hook was exactly the same, and the others were exactly the same. What we want to do is speed up the lockdown procedures so that we can slow down the ability for any active shooter who gains entry to slow them down. And a good, smooth lockdown will do that. I can't sit here and say to you, there will never be casualties. I can't sit there and say that because, history has shown that that's something that I could never say. But the ability for us to slow it down, to have those classrooms secure, and for have those teachers to know what to do when they're in that classroom is crucial for me. Those minutes, seconds are absolutely crucial. The police will turn up. They will then have to try and find and locate the perpetrators or perpetrator. They will neutralize. The scenario then will go on to what happens next. And that's the one thing that we've never tested, certainly within Waldo County, of the fact that we need to bring the buses forward. We need to have people working in an EOC, an emergency control room. We need people working with the parents who will turn up, and there are going to be parents that will probably turn up probably before the PD turn up, in truth. We need to look at those as issues. We need to know where the children are going to go, because even if there isn't an intruder, or even if the intruder disappears into ether, we still have to go through a whole procedure of moving the school out to a safe area. These things have never been practiced. So we have to, in the next few months, go through these procedures. Desktoping is one thing. Realistically, then seeing what we can do. The custodians are crucial to this. The bus drivers are crucial to this. The superintendent's office is crucial to this. And I would also say that you are crucial to this as well. And so we need to find jobs for everyone, because we have limited resources. And it might be that, some of you on the school board, because some of the parents, or all the parents, might have to work on getting on the buses, going off to Belfast, and so that there's a face there. So when the parents turn up, you can say, right, this is the list of who we've got on this bus. Things like this need to be gone through. We need to test it. We need to know what we can do and what we can't do. It's a big piece of work, and and for the first time tomorrow, we're going to have all the players there. So we will know what dispatch is going to do. And again, because we have limited resources, we have a good amount of fire officers and we have a good amount of ambulance officers. We don't know what to do with them at the moment. I know what to do with them. But the town has to come to a decision whether we go through a training program to bring fire officers in to part of rescue teams. Are we going to bring ambulance crews into what would become the hot zone? Because, we haven't found the perpetrator yet, but we have casualties. So what we don't want is, we want to learn from all the lessons of all the other active shooters, come up with a realistic response within the resources that we've got. It's a big piece of work, and it doesn't stop just with what we're doing now. I hope that answers your question.
Well, actually, I'm very pleased that everybody's coming together to really learn and help the kids the best way
What I
they
would
can,
say
and the
is
staff.
sorry, Denise, to cut you short.
That's
I
right.
apologise. We're the only ones doing it. And so And I've got to say, and again, I don't want to embarrass the superintendent, but it's the superintendent that's wanted this. And we are the only game in town, not just in Waldo County, as I understand it, pretty much in Maine at the moment. I'm sure there are others working at this, but tomorrow, getting this sorted out. So that's the priority that certainly the town has placed on getting this right.
One more question. I'm just guessing through your years of experience here. Are you aware of any types of other programs or grants that would be available to schools that are participating in this for things like technology, for like the cameras and the panic buttons? Are you aware of any type of federal grants?
I know there's a lot of money out there. I haven't been able to access any of it. And if you can, or, as a board, set up a subcommittee to look at this, I'll be happy to tell you what you need. But there's a lot of police equipment that we're short of. I'll say no more than that. So I'm trying to get some resolve on that. But it is a big gap I think in school safety at the moment, and I think certainly, not to be political, but I think that if anyone has any magic telephone numbers up in state, this is something that we really could work on. And there will be a report that comes out of tomorrow. Hopefully part of that report will be equipment that we require, training that we require. That obviously will go to the town and the superintendent, and if anything comes of that. But we should be doing a lot more, and I am surprised. And I pay kudos to the superintendent, but this is a state issue. This is not, the onus is not on the schools to do this. This is, in an ideal world, there should be half a dozen of me flown around doing this stuff with a huge budget and fixing all the things that are wrong, but that isn't the case, I'm afraid.
So you said you've toured our facilities. Is there any building deficiency as far as adequate openings of our windows for students and staff to exit properly? I'm thinking along the line of building, you have an egress window for every bedroom, which is so many cubic inches for emergency personnel and stuff like that.
I think I would start by saying that no school is built to be secure to the point that nobody can get in and that people can get out safely. There is no such school. Many schools now obviously have fencing around them to stop people coming into the school itself. We have identified some shortfalls. Those shortfalls can be worked through, so the physical constraints can be worked through by having in place, and what we are going to be having in place is the way of which those classrooms are managed. So, for example, we've recommended that in a lockdown, the teachers look at barricading, for example, because some of the glass in some of the classrooms is breakable. It's not secure glass. Could it be fixed? Yes, it probably could be over a period of time. Barricading negates that, because once you've barricaded, nobody's going to get in. So the glass then is so we're looking at strategies to get over some of the shortcomings of the buildings. I mean, quite frankly, you could put a car through this door, through here. You could literally just drive straight through the front. There's nothing you can do to negate that apart from massive amount of security. With putting bollards and different types of stuff out to the front of the door. So we have to be realistic within the building that we've got. Certainly working with Bob and looking at the cameras, they're good. It's a good set of cameras. without doubt. Could you do with more cameras? Probably yes, is the answer. But then where would you stop? I would say you need external cameras. You need some in the car park. Then you start working at that camera and then looks into somebody else's yard, and then you get into legal bits and pieces. So I think we have to work with what we've got, and that's very much my ethos. I could redesign this school and rebuild it how I would want it for millions and millions of pounds, but I mean, realistically, it's not going to happen. So I think certainly working with the senior management team, we've looked at some of the potential shortcomings. We've then looked at how we can get over those, and that's where we are now. So I am comfortable that with the training on the 30th, the desktop tomorrow, school on the 30th will be safer than it was before. Is it always going to be 100% safe? No is the answer. There's no such thing as 100% security. But we are working to improve it. And certainly, the superintendent has made it very, very clear that that's what he wants. We've provided that. So it will be safer on the 31st. Will it be perfectly safe? We go back to the 101 scenarios and the resources that we have and the building.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for doing this. I'm sure it's quite an undertaking, but board members, parents, townspeople, we really appreciate this. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It really is. Thank you.
We had nobody sign up for public participation. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Seeing none. Report from the superintendent.
Thanks, Paul. No. First, I would like to invite the board and the community, and folks that are in here, obviously, to our open house, which will be on Monday, 29 August, at the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. The open house will run from 4:30 to 7. We also will be having a community cookout right out front here where we had it a couple years ago, and that will run from approximately 4:30 to about 6. So please come in and enjoy the open house. I know that elementary school has some other activities planned up there, and we'll be looking forward to folks coming. Secondly, interviews are still going on for some vacancies. We don't have a lot. We are working on the high school guidance position, looking at potentially developing a plan from within. We have interviews for ESL that will be set up shortly. We had candidates for that. And the ed techs are continuing. So we're, again, from last meeting, we're in pretty good shape in the fact that we have all our teachers in place. Now we just got to fill a couple of the other spots, which we are working on. Quickly to let you know what's going to be happening, Paul brought up a couple points, but I'll tell you what's happening as far as the school. New staff will be coming in this Thursday. At teacher staff day is Monday, which is also our open house. And then on the next day, Tuesday the 30th, it's our district in service. And when Paul mentions all day, what that means is we are working with the middle school, high school after the morning session, and then the elementary school will be working on their lockdown assessment later on. So that's where that's coming from. Then on the 31st, we welcome back our students, grades K through 6. And grade 9 gives them an opportunity to get used to the building and staff and what's going on. That is an early release day, so that later on that afternoon, K through 12 will be working on professional development. And then on Thursday, we welcome back everybody. So we are right around the corner from having our kids back in the building and our staff. And the last thing that I have before, unless you have any questions, I put in front of you the MSMA conference information. I just want to explain a couple things, and I made sure I got it confirmed today by contacting Main School Management. The conference is in person. That is Thursday and Friday, October 27th and 28th. And that is open to all board members, if you so choose. You can see that, they haven't put the program together yet. But I asked about the delegate, because that's the one where we have to elect a delegate and an alternate, which the application is in that packet that I gave you. And this is coming from today. The delegate assembly is going to be on October 22nd, and it is a Zoom. So if anybody that's gone to this conference, remember the delegates usually meet in the big, where the basketball court is at the Augusta Civic Center, and they do all their work there. That is not going to be happening at the in-person conference. It is going to be the Saturday before. So the delegates that we elect tonight or volunteer tonight, their names would go in and they would attend the Zoom. So I hope I explained that to you. I called and talked with with Steve and Eileen today down at Main School Management to make sure that we have that. And the conference is open to all board members. It's the delegate Zoom that we have to put a name down on an alternate. And that's my report, so. I leave
Any
you with-
questions?
Augusta Civic Center, I was just looking for that information for the in-person conference. I see it. No question.
Does anybody know if they wish to attend or could attend the conference? If you do, you need to speak to Mr. Downing about getting signed up. It's not just to show up, you have to get signed up ahead of time.
Have we always sent someone as a delegate?
Most of the time.
If you've never been, it's worth going at least once, I will say that.
And you say it's a Saturday.
The delegate.
Right, the delegates, the Zoom this time. They're not doing it in person, but that's those resolutions that were given to you last board meeting. They do that, and it's also an opportunity to meet other board members from different towns and districts.
9:30 to what time, do you know?
I actually don't know I see it down here, it says 9:30, down the bottom of the delegate sheet. It says the delegate assembly will be held virtually this year at 9:30 a.m. I don't know how long that would last, but that is the starting time. And I would let Steve or Eileen know down at Main School Management who our folks are so that they can get the Zoom link.
Anyone else? I just want to know if Ms. Spiegel is responsible for the entertainment on the 29th.
Just my presence is entertaining enough, isn't it?
That's what scares me.
It should.
All right, moving on. Committee, whoops.
Do we have anybody that wants to attend the Zoom delegate thing? If that's the names I need.
I have 2 kids that would be very upset if I missed their birthday.
I'd like to know the time frame of it before I connect.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's an hour or something, Mr. We have to figure that out, but
I'm trying to remember, because when I went, they called all the delegates, they did their thing and they came back out, so I don't think it was a 5 or 6 hour ordeal. I think it was more of a 2, maybe 3 hour ordeal. I can't remember what was on the agenda the year that I attended. But that was during separation of schools. That's what that big one was about.
Is that something you could find out relatively quickly?
Yeah, I'll email Steve and Eileen and ask them what the time length would be, and then I'll let everybody know. I said I'm gonna contact Steve, I know my microphone wasn't on, and then I'll let everybody know. I'll get right back to you.
Committee reports, we had finance this evening. This is the final June report. Everything is just as predicted. Towns are all up to snuff on their payments. Looking forward to the start of the new year.
And we did have a policy meeting last night, and that was really a catch-up meeting. We hadn't met for some time, so we really needed to review the work that we have to do ahead of us. And so we were looking at multiple different policies, still looking at C-section, still looking at staff social media, still looking at, well, those are the things we are still looking at. We were also presented with a dangerous behavior prevention and intervention draft and sample. So we have a lot of homework to do before our next meeting so that we can begin to make progress on those items that we were reviewing at our meeting last night. Our next meeting will be on September 12th.
Any questions for policy? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you. Old business, follow up on the handout of 628, community-oriented policy, yeah, I'm not gonna even get there tonight. COPS there. School safety, 10 points from 2020.
Just, you know, the handout's been provided. If there's any questions, you can see that Paul and the administration and I have been working right along, and we have referred to that to make sure that we follow those 10 things, and I think you can tell from Paul's presentation, he's pretty thorough. So, it's a good guideline, along with a couple other handouts that Paul's been working with, and plus his knowledge is just, you know, it's beyond, so.
How did he land in Searsport? Thank God. Moving on to new business. Does anybody want to take these separately or take them all at once? Do we have questions for each one individually? What's your pleasure?
Can we do them individually?
That's fine. So first, A, consideration approval of the Searsport Elementary School Handbook. I need a motion and then a second to have discussion.
I'll make them, oh, sorry, and I'll second that.
Floor is open for questions and discussions. I would direct them towards Mrs. Spiegel and Mrs. Hart.
Other than staff changes, have there been any substantial differences in this handbook from last year?
Anyone else? Well, you got-
I'm not seeing the GT on here.
It was, we listed it, but we had to submit this. We hadn't hired, we weren't completely sure of the position or the person yet, so slipped it in there, and then you guys voted on it after it was submitted, so it was supposed to be on. So it's there. It is there.
Thank you.
We also have not, that's me, sorry. We, remember that this is a new position, so we haven't established all of the framework that we need to be able to write anything specific down. Next year, we'll have more specifics.
It will start.
Absolutely.
Thank you, ladies. Motion on the floor to accept the Searsport Elementary School Handbook.
Motion.
No, it's already a motion. I'm just going to call for a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. B, consideration and approval of Searsport District Middle School, High School Handbook. I get a motion
I'll
in a
make the
second.
motion to approve the Searsport District Middle and High School Handbook.
I get a second? Floor is open for questions and discussions.
Same question, other than staffing, have there been any major changes?
Just formatting, we've had some conversations around the language that needs to be changed on dress code to make it more positive. So that was done in conjunction with staff and students. Use of the language in there is different than 2021.
Do we know where that is?
Hyperlinks don't work on paper. You can click it all you want, but I think it's a
Does
deadline.
anybody see it? 'Cause
I don't see it,
I don't
and,
see
and
it.
I'm wondering, this seems much smaller to me than previous years.
It's
So
funny-
that's what my question was going to be, is what has changed, what's different? And then I do have a couple of specific questions.
It's funny you mention that, because when I was reading the email, I'm like, did I not get the full attachment?
Yeah, I don't
There should
believe
be
we
I
nope,
didn't
there should be a 50-page,
have- Yeah,
No.
this is 15 pages.
nope, this should be a 50-page document that was shared with,
Okay, so we need to see that full
right.
document before we can vote on it. And the other question that I have has to do with the graduation academic awards. So I'm not sure, we never really had our committee put in place.
no,
We had a,
not in the timeline that we had to work with from last year. So what you'll see in the handbook will be the already existing, agreed upon in the program of studies, honors, graduate recognitions that we have had in place, but we've had no time to meet with staff, with students, to really flesh out the newly added valedictorian and salutatorian component, which I think is going to require some discussion and then clarity so we can put it in a document that we can refer to moving forward.
yep,
So apologies for that not being there. That was shared with Jane, the, okay.
okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. This seemed really
I
light to
know.
me. I was like, this is really different. So there must have been
Nope.
some, yeah,
A lot of editing. There actually was a lot of editing, but
Yeah.
we didn't cut anything. There were just some things that were dated and old that we revised. But
I knew in the email when I was scrolling, I'm like, well,
Not
the
that
element-
much.
The elementary one was a lot more pages.
Nope.
So,
yeah, this was the one that stood out to me as being different.
too late. Other than the language around dress code, what, you guys, I've heard you guys say language changes. Have
That's
there been
the
any
one.
other type of?
That's the one. And through policy, we recognize that old documents had referred to policies that were needing to be explicitly put into the handbook, like the hazing policy. It was referred to, but in our policies, it refers that it needs to be in full in the handbook, so we've included those in both. And you'll see that in the athletics handbook as well. But it's a lot of formatting. We still need to update the staff listing once we know that AUPs have been filled out, and we can refer to email addresses for new staff But those are things that can just be done on the fly.
There were some parts there were some parts where what was in the handbook was kind of thin, so I went to the board policy and picked up the language directly from the board policy and pasted it in. And then as I went through each section, I audited the board policy to what the handbook is to make sure that the handbook is in accordance with the board policy. I could probably print out a list of revisions if I had a little time to put that together for you, if you wanted to see the whole list, but
I don't, that would be nice, I guess. I'm not sure that I need all of that, but I would like to just see the full packet.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking for, really, because we didn't have that, and I knew that there was something wrong.
And did you get it via email, or did you just get a paper packet?
We did get it via email.
And that should be
and
the full
I
thing.
don't recall whether the whole thing was there.
I'll share it with you now. It's a
Okay.
Google Doc.
Okay,
And then,
that would be great. Do we need to have approval on this evening?
The short answer is yes, and the reason being is that we would want to present this to our kids
Right,
when they come on the 31st.
Correct.
all right, so if you can give
that
us
what
that
Kenny and
full
Lisa
version,
want?
because now I am curious about the dress code policy piece that Ruth brought up as well.
The email was 20 pages long.
Yeah, no, this was shared with Jane.
so did she give you a PDF, or did she share a Google Doc?
Since I don't do Google Docs, it's PDF.
It was part of the minutes, the board meeting packet.
No, it should be 49 pages.
Yeah.
Do you-
So, I'm sharing the Google Doc with you now, and then I will also create it as a PDF and share that with you now as well.
How are our computers coming?
I just said to Mr. Downing, if we had our laptops, we could look at it a lot easier than on my phone.
Nobody came in July to the training. We canceled all the board meetings in July. They're ready to go whenever we want to set up some time to set them up.
What is the last page? 49?
No, what I meant, like, topic, like, this doesn't come numbered.
All right, hold on one second, let me get the PDF out, and then I'll look.
It's funny, because the first few pages are what are actually the last page in here.
Right.
Not sure.
Okay. So now the PDF is coming at you. I think the very last page, well, I'll look at it instead of from memory. The very end is board policies that need to go in there, and I think the last is about bus videos.
So did yours load? I have the dress code that's in here.
Yeah, no, that's right, you don't have the right thing, but you're getting it in just a moment. I just got it.
You got it?
I'll get a hard copy too. This is one of those things where people keep going to the printer, and if we don't come back, then it's scary.
We know what this game is.
Last year, I don't even start.
The circle of death. I'm trying to open the PDF. Tony, are you getting any luck opening the PDF?
Oh, yeah, I've already looked down through the whole thing.
I haven't gotten there yet.
It's on page 22.
States what?
The concern that came up through policy in the discussion was that the way that it was crafted and written was framed in a way to talk about minimums. it was reframed in a more with more positive language, to be more reflective of the school's goals.
Thank you.
I'm gonna make one for you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, well, it was on my,
Are you wondering what page the adjuster was on? So one thing, the table of contents doesn't have the page numbers on it yet, because as we added things, the page numbers changed.
yeah, it's 22.
That is last.
It's 22.
If you look at it on, well, you don't have a computer, so, but those are all the links.
Can I ask a question? I don't know who wants to field it. Mr. Toothaker looks like he's ready. Under B, where it says articles of clothing will display, with displays that have images or languages with violence, promoting hate speech, profanity, pornography, images or language that create a hostile or intimidating environment based on any protected class.
That language is pulled directly from the MSMA boilerplate dress code.
Do we have a definition of what is considered a protected class?
I think all of us are, right? I think we all are. Like as humans, just. Like you're our basic human rights.
So we would refer to the statutes that go around civil rights and what those are and how those are defined.
Which apply to all people.
Does anybody else see where that can get funky?
So I had that initial thought, but then Josh's response that he just gave, to me, kind of sums that up. I have a concern with A, images or language promoting the use of drugs, alcohol, and any illegal activity. Well, what about tobacco? Marijuana is actually now legal in the state of Maine.
Correct.
So,
But tobacco tobacco's a drug, right? We would, if somebody was wearing a Marlboro shirt, I think we would ask them to turn it inside out.
Correct. Those things are illegal for minors to possess. So when I think about tobacco, marijuana, alcohol, things like that, those would be, those are actually more of the prevalent concerns we have and address with dress code on the daily basis.
And a lot of times it's by accident. You know, a kid will come in with a sweatshirt from Gary's Brewery. It's like, we need to turn that inside out because it violates that policy. But it's not like they're trying to be bad or anything.
No.
I guess my concerns are still around letter D. We had a lot of conversations about this language for letter D,
Seems scant compared to the conversations we've had.
I just think it leaves this particular category up to interpretation quite a bit, because it's only saying you need to have a top and a bottom and shoes on.
And then when you look at the heading under student dress code, the second sentence, determination of these causes referring to the disruption at school will be handled by school administration on a case-by-case basis in consultation and collaboration with students, parents, and guardians to develop a plan to remediate those impacts.
So we still don't have a policy in the books for dress code. And if we should develop a policy during this school year, because we did ask for a committee to come back to us with ideas specifically on letter D, really not any of the other parts, but really just specifically letter D, would that in effect, that would not be able to go in effect until next year when you develop the handbook,
So-
if I'm not mistaken.
So, no. So the one thing that came to my mind is there's no reference to the RSU 20 policy, which if the
There-
policy changes mid-year,
There is no policy.
we have no dress code policy?
The handbooks are the policy that the schools operate on.
Well, we were hoping to develop a policy. We've had a lot of conversation around it, but we don't have a policy in place currently. And the policy committee was hoping to have a policy in place. We did have a lot of conversation about it. We handed it over to the principals to sort of work on that with a school day committee, staff committee, with some guidelines and samples and, what would you say, Ruth? We had some specific recommendations.
So we cannot create policy here. We can't put something in this handbook that creates policy that we haven't developed. So this really needs to go back to policy committee.
Yep.
Well, the policy committee the policy committee had reviewed
we
it,
have
and
not-
we
we have not-
sent it
we
to the
have-
admins
But
to,
we have not adopted a policy as a board.
we're waiting for the information to come back from admin.
But we
Correct.
can't interject something in here assuming what the policy's
Correct.
gonna be. So you kind of have to live with what you have until you develop a policy, which is gonna change things.
That's right, and I was just clarifying that by saying what I said initially. We will have to wait for next year.
I don't think next year.
If a policy changes,
I don't think we have to wait till next year, do we, Mr. Downing? If we create a policy, can't that be reconciled with a letter to
To
parents?
answer your question, the policy committee brings a recommendation to the board. The board has 2 readings on it. When it's accepted on the second reading, it becomes policy. If you want to bring that in October and November, if it's accepted by the board, you now have a new policy. So you have to then revise it and give the handout for that specific policy in the handbook. That's what you do. The reason why some say you have to wait till the next year, there are policies that you do not want to change because it could have other effects. And this would be a policy that would affect only the middle school and high school handbook, which is policy. That's why you're voting on it. The handbook is policy.
Just as a backstory, to take it another chapter back, the previous handbook writings had lengthy descriptions that referenced specifically female dress at length. And so part of that conversation was brought to administration by students to look at that through a different lens of equity and looking at those policies to not be developed on a case-by-case basis to look at gender, but to look at the student body as a whole. And so a lot of this process, over months and months of time working with student council and student representatives and teachers, went through this language and really clarified and made sure that it was gender neutral so that we were not setting ourselves up for any kind of Title IX violations where policies are dictating the dress of one gender and not the other. When you start talking about bra straps and whatnot, those are things, inseams of shorts, those policies, or sorry, those handbook writings were unproportionally targeting female students in the way they were written. And so we went through a long process of speaking with students, getting student input, talking with staff about how they are managing the handbook rules and getting those in a place that both factions of the school could operate with. And so we ended up with some of this language. And then when it was presented and shown and seen by the school board, in the policy, we were asked to bring that back to the students to look at the language that was chosen, specifically looking at the minimums. And we talked about that through some follow-up meetings and changed the language to reflect a different approach. So that's kind of where we are with this.
Yeah, and it certainly does address that language that you spoke of in terms of, targeting a specific population. It certainly does that because it's very broad. I would like to revisit it in policy again throughout the course of this year. But I think for now, you need to have a handbook.
So I have one question about I get the not targeting one gender, or picking on one gender. My question would be, are hats allowed to be worn in school by all students, or just certain students?
As a high school rule,
As part of their dress attire, yes.
so as a high school rule, hats are allowed inside of the buildings, but teachers have the discretion within their class to ask them to not be worn. So in common areas and passing times, in some classes, they're allowed. And the middle school we're ready to have that discussion about those things. But the hat would still fall under any of the images and messages. And it doesn't seem to be a big issue with students in the building. They acknowledge, they know which teachers have a rule about not wearing hats in their class, and it's just common practice.
Thank you.
Not as a handbook item.
Uniforms, we saw with all the.
I would vote for that in a heartbeat.
I don't know, I've been auditing soccer uniforms all day today, and I don't know if I would.
I'll just have my last piece about this be about the coverage. When we did speak to students, there were concerns about coverage, and this really does not address coverage. And that's really where my concern lies. I think it is more broad. It addresses, or it no longer makes a point of addressing a certain gender. So that part is there, but the whole coverage piece is still something I'd like to look at further. Not here, obviously, but.
I believe one change in the handbook, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but prior to this year, it was teacher's discretion and administration discretion. The teacher could send a student for something that wasn't appropriate, and then the administrator could say, no, it is, and then you got between the two, and this year, we've put it solely on the administrator,
Yes.
which I think is a good idea, because one interpretation can turn into well, it's fine to me, but it's not to me, but to put it back on the administrator, I think was a good move for that simple fact.
Yeah. Yes.
Not that it will be an enjoyable job for you, but.
Honestly, last year, the people that got dress coded were boys for wearing T-shirts with the sides cut off. And then if you could see a nipple, that was like violating the dress code, so I would have to have them put on more of a shirt.
If they had a bow tie on, you wouldn't see it. So motion is on the floor to approve the handbook for the Searsport District Middle School and High School. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? One abstention? Dakin? Well, you couldn't see your hand. Consideration of approval of the Searsport District Middle School, High School Athletic Handbook. Can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve the Searsport District Middle and High School Athletic Handbook.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Open the floor for discussion.
The only changes you'll find in there are referencing sports season dates, grade checks, eligibility checks, and referencing the addition of the full hazing policy, which was only mentioned and referred to as a policy, but not in full. And that's all you'll find in changes from this year's to next, or from last year's.
Anyone? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Anybody object to taking D as a whole? I will make this in the form of a motion, so I'm just looking for a second. Consideration approval for new support staff hires. Carolyn Ashe, Fresh Fruits and Veggies District. Betsy Bradley, Sub-Collar District. Ryan Fitzgerald, Special Ed Tech 3. Access 9 through 12, Charles Bradley, Ed Tech 1, Sped Ed Tech 1, Access grade 9 through 12, Dominic Buck, Sped Ed Tech 1, Rise 6 through 8, Day Treatment, Searsport District Middle School, and Jesse Washburn, Sped Ed Tech 1, Rise, grade 6 through 8, Day Treatment, Searsport District Middle School.
Tony, I don't know if it matters, but you said the gentleman's last name wrong. I don't know if that matters or not.
Which one?
You said Fitzgerald, I think it's Fitzgerald's. If that matters.
Tomato, tomato? Tomato, tomato?
I'll second that motion.
As always, there's no discussion with staff. All those in favor? Consideration of the following approval of the following positions. Kim Anderson, Co-Athletic Director for the school year 22-23 district-wide. Josh Toothaker, Co-Athletic Director for the year 22-23 district. Can I get a second?
Second.
No, I motioned, she second. All those in favor?
Well, can I ask a question first?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering why we've moved away from the single position and put it on you guys.
I'll answer that question.
Go ahead.
And I'll be blunt, I've been very disappointed in the last 2 years with the athletic directors that we had. Mr. Toothaker probably did 90% of the athletic director last year. I saw only him at events. They've discussed between us. We feel as though this would be a good move for the district to keep it here, somebody who's full-time, instead of just somebody who shows up and does a little bit. And the kids didn't even know who the athletic director was last year. So we think this is much better. It doesn't put the full burden onto Josh with Kim helping out. So that's why we took this direction.
I'm just going to say, Are you going to have any home life? Because we seem to be adding an awful lot to you guys. And
That was my question. Is this sustainable? Is this something we're going to try out for a year and then revisit and find out how it was
well,
for you guys?
he'll be on probation.
We will make this work for this year, and I think it would be, it would make sense to have some discussions on what we need to do to move forward. But as of now, for the 22-23 school year, we're up and rolling, and we will make it work.
Okay. I think it's a good idea to revisit that next year, just to get some feedback from you on how that went and whether or not, as Denise said, you had a life.
Can I ask a question? What about having like a volunteer help out with that?
Having done the job before, there are lots of details and ins and outs from, more from the high school end of things and the MPA meeting deadlines and obligations that we as a school need to adhere to, that I would be really uncomfortable having a volunteer make those decisions and be in a role to serve that way. It ultimately would fall, in this case, it rolls uphill if mistakes are made, ultimately to myself and then to the superintendent. It could result in teams and students being ineligible for competition. It could mean longer-term consequences for the district. Those are risk-reward wise, it would not be worth it to bring volunteers on to help with those types of things.
I'm not talking about like that type of stuff, like if you guys got paperwork or anything, just to take the load off, or maybe have someone come in and sit and try to learn.
The paperwork is the important part. It's the behind-the-scenes stuff. Yeah.
I'm very glad that you're stepping up, but as I voiced a few minutes ago, you live here already, so, I had great concerns about 23 of the 24 hours that you're going to be here.
That's why I have the same concerns. You got, it doesn't matter if you're an empty nester, you still need a
I
life.
appreciate, because I know how
Yes.
much goes into that, and I understand the importance of some of these things, like some of these students could be going on to college sports, and this could really mess things up, and there's a lot of burden, and I get that. But I'm sure that, I'm hoping Mr. Toothache and Ms. Anderson, if there's someone that is in the building that can help count uniforms, that's not something so,
It's-
serious, you can pull somebody to come help.
It's an extension of the school day in the classroom and the school, and so it's important to have those relationships with known quantities and faces for students and parents to see people that they know outside if there are concerns with that, as opposed to, I think what Tony was speaking to is the disconnect that we were having over the past couple of years. So I think that's an invaluable resource to have Kim and I be part of that process as well.
Well, thank you both for stepping up into that role, and there's no question in my mind that you're certainly capable and it will go really, really well. I just would like to have the opportunity to revisit that.
I guess my thing is, since there's 6 administrators sitting here, that we do thank you. We're looking forward to a great new year, and we do appreciate you, and we do see what you all do, so thank you.
I'm just glad he's going to get paid for what he's done the last 2 years. All those in favor? All right, moving on to F, heating oil bids.
We went out to bid this week, or last week, and we received a bid. We had 3 companies that returned bids, and you can tell I'm looking for it as I talk. And-
I remember.
Yeah, and we did lock into one, we just need the board approval. And we are going with, just bear with me, please. Yeah, Maritime Energy, and we are locked in at $3.7975 for the year, which, you know, is above obviously what we had last year, but it's something that we want to be there. We've budgeted, we have reserve funds, and it will fall within our budget, so that's why we went with it.
Is that with the town and everyone?
Yes, yes.
Both towns?
We have both towns and RSU 71 also is in our bid with this because we go with them on when they do their bid for propane, which should be coming within the next day or two.
So could we get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept Maritime Farms bid of 3.75.
3.7975.
Sorry, 3.7975.
7.5.
Maritime Energy.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. Moving on to 6. G, sorry.
I'm sorry,
Looks like a 6.
I'll read the name. His name is John Matola. We do not give you the profiles like we do on others. He's volunteering to assist with boys and girls middle school soccer. John has volunteered before, so he's come forward and as of 22 August.
He's been a volunteer for the rec department as well.
He'll be a great asset to help bring those kids up. He just didn't have the time when we put out for advertisement for the full position to volunteer to be a coach, so.
So do we have a motion? Second?
Second.
As always, no discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. September 13th, Finance will be at 6 o'clock Central Office, 6:30, the board meeting will be here. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. And good luck with the beginning of the new school year.